shared on Girl Pray On It is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Although I am a licensed mental health counselor, I'm not your therapist. Unless, of course, you're one of my clients. In that case, I am your therapist, and I'll see you in our next session. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapeutic relationship between us. If you are experiencing emotional distress or a mental health crisis, please seek support from a licensed mental health provider in your area or contact a crisis line. Always pray on it, and also reach out when you need help.
But not to us. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm okay. How about you?
I'm doing great. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Can you tell me, have you heard of people folding the corners of their prayer mats so that Shaitan doesn't pray with them?
I have.
You've heard of that, right? Yeah.
And my question is, why is Shaitan praying? I thought Shaitan doesn't pray.
Right, exactly. And shouldn't he? If there's anybody who needs to be praying, it probably should be him. Yeah, right?
But not gonna happen. You made that pretty clear.
I know.
You?
I know, right? But you've heard of it,
I've
right?
heard of it.
And have you ever done it? Were you ever pressured into doing something like that?
No, but I find myself always putting my prayer mat away when I'm done rather than just leaving it for convenience sake, because there's just something in my head that's it needs to go away. It needs to be away.
Okay, where does that come from?
Who knows?
So have you heard that if you leave out your prayer mat, then someone else is Shaitan's gonna come pray on it?
Yeah.
You've heard that before?
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't heard that one. So I've heard you have to fold the corner,
Okay.
right, of the prayer mat so that Shaitan doesn't pray, right? But you also have to put it away, apparently. That's crazy.
You're right. It is crazy. It doesn't make any sense because Shaitan doesn't pray. I don't know. Maybe they're worried Shaitan's going to do something else with it.
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah. What about sleeping on your stomach?
Yes, I've heard that. And that one is legit.
Is it?
Yeah, you're not allowed to sleep on your stomach.
No, you are allowed.
I mean, you can do anything you want.
It's not haram to sleep on your stomach.
Okay.
It's just disliked.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, what about whistling?
Whistling? What about it?
I've heard that, particularly around the Somali community, whistling is what brings in Shaitan.
Never heard that.
Really?
And I'm an avid whistler.
Oh, okay. Uh-oh. Okay. Today we're talking about cultural Islam versus actual Islam, right? Things that they could be superstitions, but it could just be the culture of your people or the culture of a certain group or demographic and the way in which they practice Islam. And oftentimes we hear about cultural Islam versus actual Islam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing actually wrong with doing things culturally as long as they don't interfere with Islam, right? Yeah. So what has been your experience with cultural Islam?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this in a previous episode, but being a revert, you're really coming to Islam in a more pure way, unless you're being guided by someone who's heavily influenced by culture. But, I really appreciate my coming into Islam where I wasn't so influenced by external cultures, and I was sort of looking at Islam from a pure point of view. But I think the longer that I've been in the Muslim community, the more I've seen cultural elements coming out and bleeding into Islam. And I think, as you alluded to, there's pros and cons of every single culture, every single place. We all have good and we all have some bad, you know? But, there can be a confusion when it comes to cultural practices versus Islamic practices.
Yeah.
So I think in the beginning, for me as a revert was really confusing, where I was someone might share something that's coming from a cultural perspective, and I'm and claiming that it was Islamic.
Right.
And I was I never heard of that. That doesn't really sound right.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be so firm in your knowledge and understanding of Islam, or you can get really confused by it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think what is really concerning to me is when people try and pass off these cultural practices as Islam with no real background knowledge on where the practice came from, and then why it is halal or haram. Like, I've heard that having your hair in braids and locks, right, is haram, right? Whereas that's a cultural practice that a lot of Black Muslims have their hair in, and it's not actually anti-Islam. It's fine and it's considered to be halal, but it's people's misinformation about a culture and them trying to give like a fatwa on whether or not that's halal or haram, which is really concerning. And then the inverse of that is them trying to pass off something that is from their culture as being from Islam, right?
Yeah. I'm curious how you think cultural Islam could come into play in marriages and family dynamics in a way that's potentially harmful.
Ooh, that's such a good question. I definitely think that when a couple comes together, they're bringing their own cultural and familial practices into a marriage, and it's their job to kind of identify what they want to keep and what they want maybe to no longer practice. Where that becomes really kind of like dangerous and not healthy or even toxic is when one party says you have to practice this, otherwise I'm either not going to enter into this relationship or you're doing something that's haram, right? And so I think if there's pushback on a cultural practice, I would encourage both parties in the couple to investigate where that came from, what is that cultural practice, and if it is actually supported within Islam, like it's halal, or if it's something that is antithetical to Islam. And I think, honestly, all of us in the Muslim community should be doing that to a certain extent, because we shouldn't be blindly following cultural practices that we don't know the origins from. Especially like when you think of like in America, right? When you get married, there are all of these practices that people engage in that actually come from pagan like traditions, right? So like the idea of having bridesmaids, the reason why they all dress up in the same color is because during the pagan times, all the bridesmaids would all dress up in white. And this was meant to try and trick a spirit from killing the bride or taking over her soul.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so all the bridesmaids would all dress in white, and so they would all look like a bride, basically, to try and trick the whatever ghost or spirit into not messing with the bride on that day.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Same thing with like the tradition of something blue, something old, something new. All of that is like a blessing or like protection against a spirit trying to hurt the bride, right? So even like the cultural practices that we have today that a lot of us engage in have ties back to pagan ritualistic practices that we ourselves need to investigate. So I encourage all couples to investigate any type of cultural tradition or practice that they're bringing into a marriage. And especially if these are two people who are coming from two different cultures, right?
Yeah.
Because from my experience, there's always going to be one dominant culture that is, I don't know, celebrated or highlighted within the marriage. It doesn't always happen, but it happens, right? And we want to make sure that what we're practicing is Islam or is, halal within Islam, and we're not practicing something that we don't know the origins of.
I love that. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I guess I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen in my practice as a mental health counselor. I think, I first off want to say that whatever the cultural framework is, there's absolutely no judgment. People will practice culture in whatever way they see fit. But specifically what we're talking about right now is when culture is used to cause harm to another person, or there's a mix-up between culture and Islam, and somebody uses culture to impose certain opinion on another person and starts saying that it's an Islamic perspective. That's where I'm sort of coming from. That's the framework I'm going to talk about. And when it comes to that, I see in every culture, regardless of what that culture is, there seems to be a very delicate balance when approaching in-laws and in-law relationships, specifically with the daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. This just seems to be like it kind of surpasses culture in terms of like it's just like a overall general elements. We even see this in American culture a lot of the times where there's a bit of that clashing. And so I think one thing that I see a lot is just a lot of cultural expectation put on a daughter-in-law and how that can cause a lot of pain and resentment within a family dynamic and family system. And so I think in a lot of our cultures within the Muslim community, there's an expectation that the daughter-in-law should serve her in-laws, that she should like
become their new servant, right?
Essentially, yes. And, you know, this is a very harmful cultural practice because it puts so much strain on an early marriage. It causes a lot of resentment for the daughter-in-law. There can be like a lot of pain, and it can cause just so much tension between the daughter-in-law and her family, her in-laws, and then a lot of the time the husband is like put in a difficult position where he's walking this like tightrope between his parents and his wife. And so I think this is a way in which a lot of the time I see the cultural elements causing harm within a family system. And of course, there's absolutely nothing wrong with like family members serving one another in like good faith and like to please one another, but having an expectation that anyone in the family should be like a servant of the house, doing all of the housework, doing all of the cooking, that's when I think it can cross into a territory where things are starting to get a bit hurtful. And we know that in Islam, we are meant to be like the most kind and good to our family. And yet it can get really, really ugly in an in-law situation, especially in multi-generational households where maybe a daughter-in-law is being forced to live with her in-laws and practice these like cultural expectations of serving all of the members of the household. I think in those frameworks, we have to take a bit of a step back and kind of examine what's happening there. Are these expectations reasonable to put on a person? Are these in line with our Islamic values? You know, we do know that in Islam, women are entitled to have their own space. Women are allowed to have their own house. They're specifically accommodations where they have their own room with a lock on the door, that they have their own kitchen, their own bathroom. And it's not unreasonable for somebody to ask for that as a requirement in a marriage. And so a lot of the time, living in a multi-generational household, there does become a lot of issue with boundaries, with privacy, and it can get quite messy. And that is what I see a lot with my clients who are talking about feeling like a lack of privacy or a lack of like
autonomy,
a lot of unfair expectations being placed on them. And I think like it's just so important to treat your in-laws well. If you are having a daughter-in-law that's coming into your home, or, you know, whether she's a guest or whether she's living there, like treat her like you would any other guest with the utmost respect, not with expectation, but with love and kindness and grace. And I think that if parents want to maintain a good relationship with their children, the key is having a good relationship where there is privacy and space for your children to have good marriages with one another. And we're keeping a little bit of distance and not inserting ourselves into that. Because I think I see a lot of adult children complaining that, you know, their parents or their in-laws are inserting themselves, they're inserting their opinions, inserting themselves within the children's marriages, or they're having very high expectations of their child's spouse. And it's just so important to remember to be good to one another and the most good to our family, to our in-laws, to our children, to our parents, So I think that's one piece that I see, and a lot of people weaponizing this element of like, be good to your parents, which of course is Islamic. We are taught to be good to our parents, but people weaponizing that to uh, force their children to be obedient regardless of what the ask is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think just to kind of point or make a point off of what you were just saying, I think this demonstrates why it's so important for everyone within Islam to understand what their rights are and
Mhm.
to understand Islam in and out, right? Because a lot of these situations actually, I believe particularly if a woman is able to advocate for herself and have the Islamic knowledge to kind of back it up and understand what her rights are within Islam,
Mhm.
there will be a lot less of these kind of confrontations and arguments about, well, this is our culture and this is what we expect. And actually, it's also Islam for that. And it will empower that person to be able to say, well, actually, it's not Islam and these are my rights. And I appreciate that you might do this in your culture, but that's not what I foresee for myself and my relationship moving forward.
Mhm.
So it is really important to be able to make those distinctions
Yeah.
and to be able to use your Islamic knowledge as not as a gotcha and not as like a tool for harm, but rather a way to advocate for yourself within a scenario in which you are having to advocate for what your needs are that are backed by Islam and what Islam says,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. Education will set you free. I think
Mhm.
education is always a huge part. And, when you are stepping into a marriage, knowing what your rights are as a wife or as a husband is so important,
Mhm.
as you were mentioning, for parsing through those sort of cultural elements that come into play.
Mhm.
And it's not that all cultural elements are wrong or that we shouldn't engage in them, but it's
Mhm.
just to consider when it is that the culture is clashing with Islam
Mhm.
or where it is that the culture is harming another person.
Mhm. 100%, 100%.
I'm curious if you see any elements of American culture, which is
Mhm.
sort of the cultural framework that you and I are from,
Mhm.
if you feel as though there's any elements of that are, deeply conflict with our Islamic values.
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned some of the practices like within weddings that might be in competition with
Mm-hmm.
or in conflict with Islam. I think a lot of the holidays that we have in America are in conflict with Islam. I don't celebrate Valentine's Day. I don't actually celebrate any holidays except for Juneteenth, and that is because I'm a Black American, and that has to do with our own independence and freedom from slavery, and I think that's fine to celebrate and honor.
Mm-hmm.
But any of the holidays that have religious or any religious like ties, so like
Yeah.
Valentine's Day,
Mm.
Mother's Day, Father's Day, those things, while they're great for us to acknowledge mothers and fathers, I don't necessarily agree with celebrating it as like a holiday. Whereas, like within Islam, we know that we should be highly revering our parents, right? And celebrating them daily. So we shouldn't need a holiday to celebrate that. And Valentine's Day has its own pagan like ties, anyways. And then when I think of like outside of holidays, other cultural practices, so obviously the idea of dating is antithetical to Islam.
Right.
And I think when Muslims talk about dating, right, a lot of people are like, well, dating is haram. It's like, well, obviously we're not dating in the same way that like non-Muslims are dating in America.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more of like a courtship. It's halal dating. And I think people often get irritated by the terminology that's used rather than the intention behind why we're using that terminology. Music is really big in our culture, right? In American culture, dancing is really big,
Yeah.
and it can almost be like super hard to get away from that type of stuff. And I see that it's for a lot of American Muslims, dancing and music is often something that's really hard to get away from, regardless of whether or not you view some music as halal and you view all music as haram, right? I think it's so deeply ingrained in our culture. Like when you go shopping, there's always music, right? It's like impossible to get away from.
I love Mother's Day. I love Father's Day.
Yeah, I mean, no,
So- I will say, like, this is another example of how, like, we're not always all going to necessarily align on everything. I think, like, as we said, to each their own, there's nothing harmful about celebrating Mother's Day or Father's Day.
I don't believe there's anything haram about celebrating those days. I just don't do it.
Yeah. But, that's like a really important point that we brought up. Obviously, in America, I think a huge part of the culture is drinking.
Oh, yeah,
and, sports.
Yeah.
Sports is a really big part of our culture. I am not a sports person, okay? I'm an artsy-fartsy gal.
Yeah.
So I'm not into it, but I don't think that there's, like, obviously anything that's wrong about sports. But I think
I do.
the culture is just, like, in America is just so, like, entwined with, like, you go to a game, you get a beer, you're drinking. I think, like, it's like you said, really hard to avoid those things when they're so ingrained in American culture. Alcohol is, like, so much a part of this culture. And if you're an observant Muslim who's trying to avoid alcohol, I think that can be really challenging. Those elements for sure.
So you brought up sports, right? And I think something that a lot of Muslim men really love is boxing and MMA. And those sports are actually haram. Because Islamically, you are not supposed to be engaged in any sports that is hitting the face, right? And we're now seeing that the science actually backs up why that's haram because of how many traumatic brain injuries are coming out of that sports. But like when you look at like online, a lot of the clips, you see a lot of Muslim fighters who are being celebrated, but actually the sport itself is not halal. And a lot of people don't recognize that, right? A lot of people don't recognize the fact that like boxing and MMA, all of these sports where you are hitting the head is actually haram and you should not be engaging in it. But things like karate is fine, right? Martial arts is usually fine as long as it doesn't hit the head, right? And I think that's something that a lot of Muslim men would not like to hear, right? But that's my understanding. I mean, feel free to correct me out there if you've heard differently from what I've heard. Our culture around beauty, right? I think there's been a trend of like a lot of women who go and they get like their private parts waxed and also lasered off. That's been a big trend because it is prevalent within America. However, we know that that's not halal.
Right. The only person who's allowed to see that part of a woman is her husband
or her doctor.
Yes. So I could definitely see for sure that's maybe a way in which the cultural practices are sort of in conflict. Do you think that this religion is meant to be a religion that is easy on us? And sometimes we overcomplicate it. And when you study the basic tenets of Islam, it's a fairly straightforward, easy religion. But I think being in the West where people would say we're so much in conflict with the cultural norms and that it like is harder. I think Islam can be as hard or as easy as you allow it to be or want it to be in your life. I think that like I see how there are ways in which our way of life and our lifestyle can conflict with these cultural elements. But I can also see ways in which the foundation of this country is actually very much in alignment with our values. And, I just want to say Muslims, like, we belong here. We can be here. This is, I was born and raised in this country. You were born and raised in this country. And so we can very much be a part of this culture. Obviously, there's just certain elements of the culture that we don't necessarily agree with. But I think elements of like, if you think of the tenets of this country as a place of being, for freedom and as a place of being for like religious expression and, allowing for the freedom of religion and the freedom to practice however we want to. Like, these are ways in which I think like are so in alignment with our values. And then yet like other cultural elements such as like excessive drinking or maybe not. And obviously, Islam is a very community family-oriented culture,
Yeah.
and we find that here in America, it can be quite individualistic.
All right, so it's that time where we read your listener letters on the podcast.
Yeah.
And if you want to send us an email just to say hey, or if you have a query or a question that you'd like us to respond to, you can send an email to girlprayonitpod@gmail.com. Again, that's girlprayonitpod@gmail.com, and we might just read it on the podcast.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
So now, I am extremely tired of my living situation at home. I have a long history of being abused physically and emotionally, and at 26, I am finally ready to exist as my own person and get a taste of freedom for once. I feel so behind in life and constantly trapped in my limitations. I never grew up comfortable to do much of anything because it would just result in my parents lashing out at me no matter what I did. One step right, I'm out of line. One step left, I've crossed the boundaries. I feel like I don't know how to move in a way that could ever possibly satisfy my parents, and this guilt has bestowed upon me immense suffering. I won't ever be able to do anything or learn to be on my own person until I leave home, which is only through marriage for a lot of us Arab Muslim girls, unfortunately. I have had multiple offers from people I have come to know, but none of them are from my country, and I am at my wit's end. Marrying outside of my country is like a disgrace to my family, and I'm just so exhausted of this culture, and I want to be free from all of its ridiculous standards and expectations. I feel embarrassed to turn away every good man on the basis of where he was born. I am thinking of myself, and yet even this feels unattainable. I've had a conversation with my mother a few days prior, and she said if I marry someone who's not Palestinian, she won't attend my wedding. To which I said there'll be no wedding anyways, for many personal reasons. My parents are both the type to cut off communication with me and practically disown me as their daughter, and will guilt me into believing that my life and marriage will be a failure and I will go to hell for disobeying them.
Oh my God.
I've heard these things many times in my life, and it is heartbreaking. I don't know what to do. So, can I marry someone outside of my nationality and culture against my parents' permission?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really devastating.
Yeah,
I think I first just want to say, like, I'm so sorry that you are going through that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so painful. That's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think, like, this is one person's experience that's not necessarily indicative of an entire culture of people. It sounds like she's feeling particularly frustrated in this moment with her parents being quite restrictive over her. And it sounds like they have a lot of expectations of her that are coming from culture in terms of marrying someone from her own cultural background,
Right.
and in terms of not allowing her to move out until she's married, which is like quite common across different Muslim cultures. I think I see
especially for girls.
Yes, I see a lot for girls that they're expected to live at home until they get married. And even when they go to college, usually they commute to school and live at home.
Yeah.
So it sounds like she's at a point right now where she's feeling just really fed up and frustrated. And I feel you. I think my big thing is getting married and making a huge change like this it's a really big deal. And I don't think, and I think you would agree, not to rush into it out of your frustration of your current living situation.
Right.
Because it will provide you a temporary relief from everything that's happening right now.
Yeah.
But long term, if you marry the wrong person, that is, you're going to live the rest of your life feeling miserable and feeling upset. So I hear you right now that you're feeling so desperate to get out from underneath a very restrictive household. But be very careful and very deliberate with the choices that you make, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, like, of course you can marry someone from outside of your culture, absolutely.
And that's obviously halal.
Yeah.
And one other thing that I want to mention, because she said that she was 26 and she feels like stuck and like she's not done anything with her life. You have so much more life to live. This is just one moment. And our 20s are where we're supposed to be experimenting in terms of like what's working for us, figuring out who we want to be, what career do we want, et cetera, et cetera. for many of us, it's also figuring out who we want our life partner to be with, right? Our life partner to be. And so please don't feel like because maybe other people have hit certain milestones in their life that they're ahead of you, right? You are the definer of your own life story. So you get to write how you want your life to look like. So don't feel like you're behind, because oftentimes people who look like they're ahead often either are feeling like they are also behind, or like we are all just trying to figure out what's going on in the world, right?
Of course.
But then the other piece that I want to mention is that like your parents are actually doing something that is haram. They are preventing you from marrying a Muslim man, right? Who I'm just going to assume that he's on his deen and there's nothing wrong with him. It is haram for your parents to say no to a potential spouse strictly based off of their nationality or their culture, because they have a certain ideal in mind for you to marry another Palestinian. So what they're doing is actually haram. And I think a lot of imams and sheikhs would actually say that if this continues to be a thing and you're unable to find a spouse that is agreeable to them, you can actually ask an imam to be your wali and move forward with a marriage. So if that's something that, if there's been someone in mind who you feel like this is going to be a really great partner, you feel like you've, hit every checklist, you've talked to this person, you know them well, you've done your background research on that person, and you've learned who he is from his own community, I would say in this instance, you're not actually disobeying your parents, but you're moving forward with something that is halal. And if you have, like, let's say a brother who's willing to be your wali, or you have an uncle who's willing to be your wali, do it that way. But in this instance, your family is actually doing something that is explicitly haram because they are preventing you from getting married to a good Muslim man, right? And that can lead to its own, like, number of sins, because you didn't get married to this person or multiple people when you had the opportunity.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But I think it's not easy to make such a huge monumental decision without your parents being supportive of it. And so I think, like, if that's a last resort that you have to, like, come to, you may make that decision for yourself. I want you to consider all angles and know what the risks are. Because as difficult as it is right now to be in this position with your family, it may also be really, really difficult to not have a relationship with them anymore. It could be really hurtful. And it's just, know that could be a risk, know that could be a possibility. And of course, the decision is yours to make. I just, with all of my clients, with anyone who I speak to, I don't ever advise them to make any decision. That I just advise them to think of all angles. And so if your parents are preventing you from getting married and getting married to a good person, think about all of the different options that you can pursue. Do you want to move forward with marrying another Palestinian? Do you want to move forward with marrying someone from outside of your culture, but know that it will make your parents unhappy? I think you have to weigh all of these really heavy decisions in your mind about, it's unfortunate to be in this situation, but just think about what you're giving up. And think about, if you are going to make a huge decision such as getting married, make sure you're getting married to the right person. Because I know, unfortunately, a lot of people who are in similar situations, and you are absolutely not alone, a lot of people in these situations end up moving from one very restrictive household to a very restrictive household because they wanted to escape the first one.
Right. Yeah.
And now they're spending the rest of their life with a, potentially abusive husband, or, husband's family who mistreats the wife. And so I think as hard and as frustrating as this situation is right now, be really careful with the decisions that you make moving forward, and don't make a rash decision out of frustration of wanting to leave home. Because I get it, especially if you're experiencing abuse. if you're experiencing abuse, that is wrong on so many levels. And I think, can you consider finding some way to limit the time that you are at home? I think like I would try to encourage you to find ways to find relief from your home situation without jumping into just marrying kind of the first guy that comes along.
Yeah, but I mean, so here's where I would disagree with you. She said that she was being abused, right? Physically and emotionally abused. So for me, like, if she's saying that she's being physically and emotionally abused, like,
She needs to get out of
she
there.
needs to get out. Yeah.
She does, but
yeah.
is the only way to get out through marriage? Can she
No.
go and can she stay with a friend? Like,
Yeah.
can she negotiate with her parents about...
Well, it sounds like no, right? Not until
Sounds
she
like
gets...
no.
Yeah. Right. So here's the thing. You are 26, and if you were 18 or in your early 20s, I would say take a pause, right? But you are in your late 20s now. I feel like this person, their frontal lobe is fully formed. I feel like because you're 26, you're able to make decisions hopefully from a well-reasoned perspective, right? Where you're thinking about, like you said, all the different sides of it. But if someone is saying that they're being physically and emotionally abused, I personally want them to get out of that perspective, or out of that household, as quickly as possible. So to me, what it sounds like is what you want is freedom, not necessarily marriage. And I would encourage you to seek an apartment, and see if that doesn't solve some of the issues that you're feeling are most prevalent for you. Because I'm wondering if a year on your own or 2 years on your own is what you're actually wanting versus getting into a marriage. And so freedom and marriage don't always mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
no, we're in agreement.
Yeah.
If you're being abused, you need to get out of that house.
yeah.
It is never okay to physically abuse a person, emotionally, whatever it might be. But we just know that in a lot of these cultures, it's almost impossible to like find a way to move out without marriage being an element.
Yeah.
Especially if you are financially dependent on your parents.
Yeah.
So I think like what we're both saying is you need to get away. Is marriage the only way that you can get out?
Right.
Because ideally you would be able to get out without marriage being the condition.
Yeah.
And that you would be able to, have your own space or be with a friend or even, moving in with a friend's family.
Right.
Like finding some way to get away from the abusive environment without it being conditioned on you jumping into a marriage.
Right.
And hey, if you want to get married and like that's, you're at a point where that is what you're looking for, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm sensing from the message was she's not wanting to get married. She's
wanting freedom.
She doesn't want marriage for the marriage. She wants marriage for freedom and to get away from her family.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm saying like, I think that this could be a problematic because I'm worried that she's going to end up in potentially another abusive situation by kind of moving too quickly. And so, like, how can we find a way to get you out of this abusive environment without jumping into something else too quickly?
Right.
And maybe it's even going to like a women's shelter if that's like if it comes to it. Maybe it's staying with the friend, it's staying with the friend's family.
Yeah.
Finding some way to have a little bit of distance from the family and limiting the interactions with the family so that you're afforded some more time to really think it through your next steps.
What I'll say is that I'm wondering if you can live with maybe a married sibling, right? Maybe you have a brother or sister who's gotten married, they have their own life, and you can go move in with them, or even an aunt or an uncle. And now's the time to start applying to some jobs farther away, giving yourself an excuse as to why you need to move out, right? And so those would be the things I would maybe make as next steps before we enter into marriage as being the next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we both would agree. She's trying to get out as soon as possible. It's kind of it's feeling like she's just at such a point of frustration where all she wants to do is get away.
Mm-hmm.
And the marriage element is just like for the sake of getting out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like I want you to ask yourself whether or not that's the right reason for you to get married.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if there are other options out there.
Yeah, and definitely seek out a therapist, because it sounds like you are going through a lot, and
of course.
you're definitely going to need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And a therapist has like tons of different resources in your area that can help you find the freedom that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like both the parents and this listener are all operating out of trauma. We don't know what you guys have been through. We don't know what the family has been through, but there's obviously some generational trauma that's being passed down, where, you know, there are maybe these harmful cultural practices, and everyone is sort of in survival mode, operating from their own trauma that they've lived and they've seen. I know, especially as we're talking about Palestinians who have lost their homes and lost their land. I understand there a desire to have a
strong lineage,
and to protect their culture. And I wonder if the parents are operating from a framework of like, we want to continue to pass down the legacy of, you know, our story as Palestinians. Like, I get that it's coming from a place of trauma. But at the end of the day, we all need to ask ourselves, when is culture coming in conflict with our Islamic values?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's it. So we would love to hear about, you know, what you decided to do. You can send us an email with your updates to growpronounitpod@gmail.com. And to anybody else out there listening, if you have a similar issue or something that you'd like us to comment on, you can send an email to growpronounitpod@gmail.com.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. All right. So now is the time in the podcast where I, Aisha, look at the camera and I rant about something that is bothering me that day, that week, that month, whatever. And today, the thing that's bothering me is when Muslims do not give me the salams after I've given them the salams.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's bad enough when they just walk right past you with no salams, but then when you say salam to them and they do not respond.
Yeah.
Rude.
Or even, I will even just give them a smile and then they won't do it.
Yeah.
And you know what I've found is that oftentimes the people who do that to me the most are the Khalijis. I'm about to get like excommunicated from like the Gulf Coast. I'm not, but yeah, I mean, like, do you know what I mean when I say Khalijis?
No.
Okay, so people who are from like Dubai, you know, the Emirates, like Qatar, like Saudi, that they're not giving you the salams. They're not giving you the salams, and they don't want to. They like, don't even look at me. You're too poor to look at me, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is?
I think it's actually because like they come from a culture where like everybody's Muslim there. It's like, can you imagine just walking through like where there's like hundreds of thousands of Muslims and having to say Assalamu alaikum to every single one? You know what I mean?
I mean, they did it 1,400 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but did they, though?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was alive. I wasn't there. But, like, I would assume because we're told that we're supposed to.
Right, yeah. But, yeah, I think it's rude. I think it's very rude to not give the salams back, right?
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that people just say it, like, really quietly, and it's like, no. Be loud and be proud. We're Muslim. And we're out here.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I think, like, there's something so pure and lovely about our greeting and greeting each other with salam. Because, like, in a place where, like, Muslims are usually the minority, like, in America, it's, like, so lovely just, like, being out and about and you're like, I see another one of us. And, like, we're just automatically bonded.
Yeah.
Like, that is, like, so sweet and pure. And I just love my interactions when I'm like out and about and I see a Muslim and we're both like locked in and saying salam to each other.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And when there's like we make eye contact and I say salam and they don't say salam, it's hurtful.
Yeah. I assume when people don't say salam to me, it's because they're racist and they don't like that I'm black.
Yes.
That's
I mean,
like-
that was
yeah.
my thought too, but like it also happens to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. Like, I know for a fact that like, they're looking me up and down and they're like, no, not to her.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, they
yeah.
need to go listen to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's last
Sallallahu.
sermon.
Yeah.
Where he very explicitly condemned racism.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we need to be bringing back the Muslim culture of saying salams to one another, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Because I'm not just some other no name on the street. I'm your sister in Islam. Give me the greetings. And also, I think it's also really great to know, like, I especially want more non-hijabis to give me the salams. I love when non-hijabis give me salams because it's like, oh, we're locked in. And if I see anything happen to you, I got you, girl. I got you, right? And I want to know that, there's someone in my corner. There's someone around me. I think it helps for, like, safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about non-Muslims saying salam?
Yeah, that's cruel. But, like, if something goes down and you just gave me the salams, you have to be 100% prepared to have my back. So as long as you're ready for that, like,
That's fair.
yeah, I feel like if you're just giving me salams because you're like, I'm cool with the muzzies.
Yeah. Like, I know the lingo.
Yeah, you know the lingo. Okay, well, you got to be down for the cause. Okay, I want you. If anything happens, I'm looking for you, right? Because you just gave me the salams, and I want you to know that you have my back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Valid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we're
yeah.
Muslims. We should be saying salam to each other.
Yeah.
Like, there's something lovely about it. Let's, like, remember that it's a way of unifying each other,
Mhm.
And, if I see you on the street, I will say salam.
Mhm.
And it's okay for you to expect that of me.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a non-hijabi, like, come say salams. Like, I would love it because I think that, like, obviously, as hijabis, you see me, I see you, right? But I want to know that there's, like, Muslims undercover, right? I want to know that there are people around who got my back and I got your back, right?
Sometimes I will get, like, from non-Muslim men, they'll be like, Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's just a way to pick you.
And I like, sometimes I'll be like excited for a second. I'm like, oh, well, I can stop. You're Muslim too.
Right.
But
yeah.
no, it's like not always with the best of intentions.
Yeah,
I
sometimes
think.
they're just trying to pick you up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward, right? But, like, even Muslim men, like, you know what? Even though I don't want a man talking to me, like, for any reason, if you just want to give me the salams just so that it's like a lowdown. It's like, I got you, you got me. I'm like, all right, I see you. But most Muslim men don't do that. They don't even do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay.
It's okay, and I understand
if it's
yeah.
a dude, it's okay.
Yeah, I get it. But let's reconnect out there. Let's do that. I think we got to revive the sunnah. Is it a sunnah? No, it's not a sunnah. It's like it's a fard.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the thing we're supposed to be doing then.
Well, it's so when somebody greets you,
Mm-hmm.
you should give them either the same level of greeting or more.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know why I said revive the sunnah, but you guys know what I mean. All right. Anything else?
Were we a little messy today?
But you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. So.
Okay, well, we were a little messy today. That's okay. Sometimes it be like that. It's fine,
It
right?
do be like that.
Yeah. And we'll catch you on the next one. Hopefully, we're a little cleaner.
Yeah, we'll catch you on the flippity flop. Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you for tuning in to the Girl Pray On It podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on. Be sure to follow us on both Instagram and TikTok at Girl Pray On It Pod. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girl Pray On It Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen, so you'll always be up to date with our newest episodes. Stay connected, stay encouraged, and as always, girl, pray on it.